Israel Adesanya versus Paulo Costa. Now, what really happened in this fight? A genius game plan and amazing performance from Israel Adesanya, making Paulo Costa just pay at every given turn. Something I said before this fight was that Paulo Costa is the fighter that's going to make Israel Adesanya look really good. And that is exactly what happened, because Costa could not attack from a distance, and he didn't even pressure that much. So all he did was almost exactly what Yoel Romero did. He just stood from a distance and waited for Adesanya to open himself up, right? Look to counter Adesanya or look to blast through some opening. And I don't know why Romero and Costa took this same game plan. They're waiting for the longer, faster striker to open himself up. They're waiting for him to make a mistake, right? This game plan made Paulo Costa stay at Adesanya's distance, his range of attacks, the entire fight. If you're going to stay away from Adesanya, he's not going to engage you. Why would he fall into the shorter guy's range? He's going to stay at his longer range and snipe at you. He's going to kick you to the leg. He's going to throw jabs at you, connect with those. And now you have to engage him, or you're just going to keep getting leg kicked and jabbed from a distance the entire fight. And it will go to a decision if you never adjust, just like in the Yoel Romero fight. But Paulo Costa eventually had to engage, and he got knocked out for it. Adesanya is way too smart, he's way too good, he's way too fast. Even if he does make a mistake, which he did make one in this fight, that confirmed Paulo Costa's game plan. Adesanya feints, and then he was going to throw a leg kick as Costa moves away, but Costa moved too far away, and Adesanya abandoned the kick midway through, which caused him to overextend just a little bit or over-rotate. You can see the huge opening that is on Adesanya's blind side. Costa did nothing to Adesanya before this happened besides a few feints. Once this presented itself, once Adesanya made this mistake, that's when Costa just bum rushed him. He threw a looping left hook and looked for a right hand, but Adesanya was just so much faster to move away. He simply hops back, switches stances, and retreats on the left side, but Costa was on him. Costa pressured him at this moment, but now Costa messed himself over by starting to taunt. Right? He has Adesanya exactly where he wants. Adesanya was rarely in this position where his back was on the cage, and Costa just lets him get away. He starts taunting instead of cutting off the cage, and then Adesanya just simply feints, and Costa retreats all the way back to the center from it. Really, all Costa did whenever he had Adesanya to the cage was just throw these huge winded up body kicks, all telegraphed and all easy to see. There was a point where Adesanya saw the body kick coming from like hours earlier, you know? He saw it so premature. He already brought his left hand out there, ready to catch the kick before he even gets halfway to him. That's how early he saw the kick coming. And feints was a huge part of this fight on both sides. Costa actually put out some really good feints, and that was his best way of getting Adesanya to move to the cage, because that is exactly what Costa wants. So then he could start firing out attacks in a more safe distance. And Adesanya has very few options to get away. So he was throwing feints early, but then as the fight slowly played on, his feints got less and less active. He started taunting more than feinting. He started falling into the feints of Adesanya to the point where he was completely lost and confused by them. I mean, there was a point where Adesanya double feints with the left, shows the right, feints with the left again, and Costa's reacting. But then he just says, you know what, I'm just gonna cover up. I don't know what he's doing. So he just puts his hands up, and then he just switches back into the parallel stance, which is probably the least defensive stance you want to take ever, because it makes it that much harder to block and move away. You do not have the best balance to block and absorb strikes. And that was the story of the fight. As it played out, Costa was getting less sharp and falling into things a lot easier, and that includes the question mark kick. Whenever Adesanya was throwing the question mark kick early in the fight, Costa was able to block it or evade it. And then slowly and slowly it got closer and closer. Costa started blocking to the body now. He started falling into the first feint of the question mark kick, where the question mark fakes to the body and then circles around to the top. He started dropping his hands to the body to block a body shot and almost gets hit to the head. And then in the second round, there was a point where it touches him. Eventually, this leads up to the point where Adesanya is trapping the lead hand, getting the attention on it, as well as establishing range to kick Costa, right? If you can touch his lead hand, you're also going to be able to kick them. He fakes a left straight and gets Costa to slip on the outside, leaning his head to the right, which is also leaning his head right into a left high kick, which lands with the foot and stuns Costa. At first, Adesanya didn't know that Costa was that hurt until he saw how big Costa reacted to his feint. Right, Adesanya fakes like he's going to throw a left kick, and Costa just clears the field away from it. This is a strong sign that Adesanya has him hurt. So then he starts pressuring him, and this is extremely cerebral by Israel Adesanya. And that was the start of the end, to the point where Israel Adesanya actually knocks him out. It's almost the exact same sequence, the exact same knockout that he got on Robert Whittaker. He slipped and threw the right hook, then he leans far back with a looping left hook, and that is the one that knocks out both Costa and Robert Whittaker. It's the exact same punch. But what did Costa do here? He threw a jab left hook combination with the same hand. After getting baited out by a feint from Israel Adesanya, Adesanya made it look like he was going to come at Costa on a straight line, so Costa tried to intercept him with a jab and then follow up with the left hook as Adesanya comes in on the close range. And we see this exact same thing from Costa 23 seconds before the knockout sequence. The exact same thing happens, besides that Adesanya didn't counter him. Costa comes in with the jab, left hook combination. What does Adesanya do in both sequences? Slips his head on the inside of the jab, but in the one prior, he just switched steps backwards to get away from the left hook. That right there is all he needed to feel out that combination to counter and finish off the fight the next time he sees it. Slips his head on the inside, tries to counter with the right hook over the top. It gets blocked because Costa came down the center, right? He got a straight punch on the looping punch of Adesanya, so it gets blocked, but then Costa tries to connect with the left hook, and Adesanya was just quick enough to move his head away from it. Costa way overextends with the left hook, exposing himself, and gets clipped by a left hook that hits him like right on the temple to the ear area, and this pretty much ends the fight. And that is pretty ironic. He was waiting for Adesanya to expose himself so he can knock Adesanya out, but the reverse happened. Costa exposed himself and Adesanya knocked him out. So it was an amazing performance by Izzy Adesanya, just made it look really easy, no real difficult at all. Costa didn't do anything to really make it a dog fight or anything that people were anticipating. You know, I understand some people were saying this was going to be fight of the year. I did not see how it could have been, to be honest, because Costa was always going to have a hard time attacking from the center of the cage, right? He needs the fight to the cage, not in the center. In the center, I just didn't know what he can throw to make Adesanya respect him or trick Adesanya in some way. I had no idea what he was going to throw besides maybe leg kicks. He threw a couple in the fight, but didn't go to him that much. But what he did go for were a lot of body kicks that were very, very slow, and Adesanya saw all of them coming. And who's going to fight Adesanya next? It really has to come down to the Whittaker and Cannonier fight, right? Even if Whittaker wins, I think he warrants a rematch. If Cannonier wins, that is a definite number one contender right there. Fights Adesanya, that should be a very interesting fight. I've picked Jared Cannonier as the nightmare matchup for Adesanya in this middleweight division, and that is especially why I want to see that fight. So I hope you guys enjoyed the breakdown. If you did, make sure to thumbs up. If you enjoyed my content, make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.